and welcome to Tremco Live, where we're socially distant but technically connected. I am Marcy Tyler, the Director of Building Science for Tremco, and I am joined once again by my co-host.
I've missed you.
Yes, I missed you too.
I'm Paul Hogenboom. I'm the president of Tremco Construction Products Group. Marcy, a tremendous collection of brands, companies, product systems, and of course, most of all, people all over the world.
All over the world. So Paul's been out visiting with some of those people lately.
I have, and they visited with me, and I've not been able to be here.
Yeah, we missed you. Paul hasn't got a chance to see last week's. I was live from the test wall. So we're going to start kind of opening up some of those things, doing different things like that. And I'm really looking forward to July, because we really want to get out on the road, whether it's us or you. We're really excited about being able to just kind of get back into touching base with our customers.
How's our thermal chamber doing, Marcy?
Our thermal chamber's coming along. We've got a great team over there. Our research and development director, he took over the test facility, and he hired 2 new guys. We have 1 more coming on, and they're doing an amazing job over there. So,
are we going to have the thermal chamber this summer, perhaps?
We're gonna do a nice debut of it. Yeah. Okay. So we're really excited about that. Exciting. Yeah, we've been giving tours of the test facility. So if you're interested in that, we give them regularly. We talk about all the great testing we've done and what we will be doing with that thermal chamber. So
yeah, just I think was a vision for 3 or 4 years. I think the procurement process started a couple of years ago. Yeah. It's so wow. It's exciting. Yeah,
it's exciting, and I can't say it enough. That Phil Effler and Sergio Gonzalez, the 2 guys that are over there making things happen, great additions to our team. We're really excited to have them.
Terrific.
Yeah. So, Paul, the month of May, we've been talking about the history of technologies. So we're going to continue on today and next week talking about history of technologies, history of our industry. So we'll get a few slides up here to kind of walk us through that dialogue. And once again, it's always great to see all those, the brands and the companies. And we don't have a picture of the people, but of course, obviously, we'll be bringing a lot of people to you in the next couple of months as we make our way through different themes, different topics, and continue with Tremco Live.
Yes.
So, okay, so this month in particularly, we wanted to be able to talk about EIFS and Stucco and the history of that. So we're going to welcome our guest on right now, Keith Simon with Building Exterior Solutions. Keith, welcome to Tremco Live.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. We're really excited to have you on the program today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So Keith, I've known you for quite a while. I think we met, Paul hears me mention it all the time, Building Science Summer Camp, which we haven't had. We didn't have last year, and they're not having it this year. So I think that's where we originally met. But Keith, tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, your history with the industry.
Sure. Well, I'm the Building Exterior Solutions. We're a division of Terracon in Austin, Texas. And I'm the Building Enclosures Department Manager for our group. So folks probably know Terracon more for our geotechnical drilling, environmental abatement, and materials testing groups. Those are our largest service lines, but our facilities service line also has a national presence, while not as large as the others. And Building Enclosures Consulting is a big part of that. So we do we consult on all phases, new construction, existing construction, building enclosure commissioning, anything that has to do with the enclosure. So walls, roofs, windows, waterproofing, below grade, anything like that. And so one collaboration we've had in the past with Tremco and Marcy was our flanged window testing research, where we collaborated on testing a whole bunch of specimens to see how flanged window, different details would perform in terms of air infiltration and water infiltration. And folks can read about that in an ASTM publication, the summary of our results for that. So anything related to the enclosure, but today's focus is on stucco and EIFS, because we see so many stucco failures. We could probably make our living alone regarding stucco failures. They're just everywhere. And a question I get so often from architect colleagues is, how's that possible? We've been doing stucco for literally thousands of years, and yet there's stucco failures everywhere. Why can't we get it right? So this was a presentation that I wanted to put together for a long time to kind of address that basic question. And then the other half of it is a cousin of stucco, EIFS, or exterior insulation finishing systems. And there's just so many myths and misunderstandings regarding EIFS that this felt like a presentation that could take those two big questions and try to answer a lot of those misunderstandings for folks.
Great. So I was mentioning to Paul that we were able to work with you guys and do some testing. They did a great job. They did some field testing of windows, and then they came here to Cleveland, and then we did testing at our test facility. So that's what Keith was mentioning, this great paper to be able to compare the data of what they did before and then the data that we did now. So it's really, when will we be able to share that paper?
Well, the first round of testing and summaries was previously published by ASTM and is available. But the second sort of round of research and testing, which was the collaboration in your very sophisticated facility in Cleveland, that will be published in the IBEC journal. So it will come out. We're just now waiting for it to be published, but that'll be this fall in the IBEC National Conference journal and proceedings.
And I think you'll be giving it live in September, right, at their conference.
That's right, in Arizona, if it's in person, or virtually if it's not in person, to be determined.
Fingers crossed. But so working with Keith and some of his colleagues, Dante and I actually, our very last trip before COVID, we went to their office in Austin, Texas. So we were able to, check out their facility, spend some time with them. Great advantage that they have, Paul, right in their back door, when they walk out their back door, is a brewery. So once the workday ended, we went out the back door over to
maybe we can do the same on our campus.
That would be great. But it was great working with you guys. And while we were there, Keith had samples from some stucco testing and demonstrations that they did at their facility. And ironically, I think the very next day, one of our colleagues, Chuck Bundrick, who came with Drive It, was coming to give a presentation. So it was very ironic that Dante and I were there, and then Chuck was either coming the next week. And that's when we started talking about this great presentation that Keith put together. So we wanted to give everyone today a little teaser of this presentation, because he's going to give it in its entirety in June. So stay tuned for our June educational series like we did in March, where Keith will be one of our guest presenters, bringing us this great content. And I know we wanted to talk, since May is our month of history and making May memorable. This is a great slide that Keith put together that really demonstrates the history of stucco, and then stucco CI versus EIFS. Take it away, Keith. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Sure. So this question, what we've been doing it for literally thousands of years. Why do we see so many failures? Why can't we get it right? And it's important to go back in time, right? And Babylonian stucco, before the Common Era, and look and think about that was direct applied stucco to a homogeneous masonry wall, and it was a lime plaster, and it was there was no lath, it was direct applied, there was no WRBs, it was all homogeneous. It wouldn't meet today's energy code, right? There's no insulation which lowers the drying potential, so there's none of that. There's no air barrier, but insanely durable, right? And so we go from there, and maybe that was a European climate or different parts of the world, and then we go through this changes over the millennium, over the centuries. There's direct applied against timber. There's a development of cementitious plaster. There's introduction of insulation, and then increasing levels of insulation, and then the incorporation of wood sheathing members, plywood, OSB. And so these building materials, they get less and less durable, right? We're going from like stone, solid masonry to engineered wood, like OSB, which has just a tiny bit of the moisture resistance that those other materials had. And then the drying potential of the stucco itself the perm rating gets lower and lower and lower. So and then we have insulation that gets larger and larger and larger. So the drying potential of our wall section is dramatically dropped over this time period, and yet the materials we're using become more and more vulnerable. And then the climates aren't necessarily the same. Here in Austin, we're hot and humid, which is so different from like, say, an ancient Spanish direct applied system. The climate's different, the wall section's not even the same. So it's sometimes I think about those changes and wonder like why we don't have more failures going on. So we'll talk in the presentation about how that morphed from ancient days to modern days, and then all the variations. And so, but there's a whole bunch of variations, sticky stone and 1 coat versus 3 coat, and especially EIFS, again, exterior insulation finishing system. And comparing these two, stucco over continuous insulation versus EIFS. This is looking, that's the future, right? So like past, present, and future, where are we going? And analyzing these two options is really critical for how we move forward in terms of high performance and in terms of how our walls are going to manage heat, air, moisture, vapor, and durability, how we can do it durably and robustly.
And I think that's so important, Paul, because I think everyone's going for a look essentially, but they're not thinking about, well, and I'm sure they are, but we need to make sure we think about where it's located, what's the use of the building, what's the expectation of life of that building, so that we're really managing that performance needs. And I love it when you guys were here in Cleveland back then, they talked about instead of calling EIFS, because EIFS sometimes, people know EIFS of yesterday,
Yep.
And it doesn't have a good name for it at that time. They like to call it CPG. So it's the continuous insulation finish system. So I think Keith and our friend Trevor from JE Dunn was lobbying to change the name.
Our friend and colleague Trevor Brown, who's the quality manager for JE Dunn Construction in our area, you have to give him credit for that. He said, on our jobs, we don't sell EIFS, we sell CPG, continuous insulation finishing system. And we tell our clients about CPG, and they love it. And they're like, let's do that. And I say, well, what's the difference between CPG and EIFS? And he's like, there's no difference. It's just a marketing change.
Well, I think we just put Keith in our branding department.
Keith and Trevor. So.
But I love how Keith talks about systems, right? And
Yeah.
we're so committed to systems testing, and as you always educate me, components all by themselves, not that interesting.
Yeah.
Systems, very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So what do we got here in these pictures?
So one thing I'll go over in the presentation is stucco best practices, which is focused on modern stucco, and I'll cover common architectural mistakes regarding stucco so that we can improve our details and make our details more comprehensive, more thorough, more durable. But then also go into the common failures we see with modern stucco and how we can ensure better installation and practices. In fact, in the presentation, I have my top 10 list of crack prevention strategies. So there'll be inevitably some things that you already know, folks already know about, proper ways to do control joints and detailed control joints and incorporate them on their project. But hopefully there's at least some strategies in there that maybe folks haven't thought about as much, whether it's moist curing of the stucco or the importance of mock-ups or re-entrant lath patching to bolster re-entrant corners, things like that.
That's awesome, because I think when we talk about all of these different types of installation practices, I love showing the do's and don'ts, and we learn so much from the don'ts, right? So having those visuals and those top 10s, I think is going to be so helpful.
Yeah, maybe, we do a great job with animation, 3D animation. Maybe we could create an animated series to go with that.
Yeah, we'd love to be able to help out with that for sure. Well, and as we progress through, and obviously you'll go through and talk about stucco, but we also wanted to be able to talk about the preconceived notions or issues that people think of or have thought of EIFS in the past.
Yeah, so one of the biggest problems for EIFS in our industry, just as we were talking about with calling it CPG instead of EIFS, is it has a stigma. No doubt about it, there is a stigma. that is just brutal. And it comes from, I hear it from architects, I hear it from building owners, not contractors so much, because I think contractors understand how it's installed as a system, so they don't really think of it as this this stigma in the industry. They seem to, you know, get how it performs. But a lot of building owners just simply will not do EIFS because they heard about all the litigation that happened in the 80s and 90s and just want to stay away from it. So what we're going to talk about is, yes, that is true. There was some serious problems, but that was before we knew that EIFS, that was when EIFS was being installed as a barrier system, not a drainable system, number one. And number two, it was a barrier, so there wasn't even a WRB behind it. There was no redundancy, no backup. So it would just be like foam adhered to the wood sheathing. So it worked fine if it worked as a barrier, but a barrier is always going to fail eventually. So, and then it's a total disaster when it does. So yes, it's true that EIFS was a problem back then, but today's modern EIFS, when it's a drainable system and it's done right, is just like, you know, it's not apples to apples anymore.
Yeah, just, you know, the energy efficiency benefits and those preconceived notions from the past is really a key part of us as an organization really getting out there. Next week we do have the director Scott Robinson from EMA coming on because they're celebrating their 40th year actually on Friday. So it'll be interesting to have him on and how he's working as an organization to get past that. But I love these two pictures here. Just, you know, EIFS is your way to get that continuous installation in a much more simple way. And then the other picture, of course, we're excited that Drive It is part of us. We're excited that we were able to include the Drive It Outsolation Plus with our Securic XR 430. So now we're going back to that system, right, Paul? Talking about a system, one manufacturer being able to bring everything that customer needs for that entire wall with a nice performance.
So continuous insulation is so important for us moving forward in terms of durability and energy performance and thermal comfort, is achieving that continuous insulation. The challenge with continuous insulation, or one of the challenges I should say, a big challenge, is cladding attachments. How do you fasten the cladding? And so 90%, 99% of the time we see cladding attached with continuous metal Z-girts. There's so much thermal bridging through those continuous metal Z-girts, 85% R value loss, something like that, that you're not actually any better off than just using fiberglass bats between your metal studs. I mean, it completely obviates the whole idea of continuous insulation. So there's ways of getting around it. You can use fiberglass Z-girts, you can use attachment system, clip systems to try to use it, or you can use a system that doesn't have fasteners, which is EIFS, right? There are no fasteners. It's just it's an adhered system. So it's really one of just a few systems you can do where you don't have to deal with cladding attachments. Another one would be something like a precast wall. You could do a precast sandwich panel, but that's a whole different can of worms right there.
Well, and ironically, at our test facility, Paul, the most common request is fastener sealability testing, right? Because if you picture all the different types of possibilities of anchoring systems for your facade and your insulation, and how many times you're going to poke that air barrier membrane that you so perfectly put up, it's the most common request for us to test our products.
Yeah, and I think when we were hosting live groups there, those were the ones that everybody gravitated towards, where you probably had 10 different ways.
Yeah.
And then you would always kind of do a trivia thing saying, okay,
which one worked?
Which one worked, which one didn't? And it was often counterintuitive.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, continue to do that. What's great now with the thermal chamber, the thermal environmental chamber, we'll be able to demonstrate building without fasteners using something like an exterior insulated finish system and those true benefits. So simulate it electronically, digitally, and then actually prove it out in the chamber. So we're really excited about being able to do that. And then next up, people, you know, they're like, EIFS isn't real, you know, or EIFS looks cheap.
I remember when I first heard the words, it's not real.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you had to pause for a moment and digest that.
Yeah.
I remember when I first moved to Austin in about 2010, and I was working for an architect, a really good architect, and we were downtown Austin. But he said something that rubbed me the wrong way, which was we looked at 2 high-rise buildings. One was an EIFS building, and the other one was an exposed concrete structure building with, you know, very designy, very articulated structure, but it was the concrete structure was exposed. And he said, this one over here, the concrete structure, that's made of real materials. It's made of glass and steel and metal and concrete, where this one over here is made of foam. So I don't like it. And that just struck me as crazy, because the way I saw those 2 buildings is the one in EIFS was clothed. The one that was exposed concrete was naked. They're both made of concrete and metal and glass. They both have the exact same structure. It's just this one is exposed to the elements and this one has its clothes on. I mean, you wouldn't send your kid out with no clothes in the middle of winter or the middle of summer, right? And the concrete building, you know, it's thermally inefficient, it's thermally uncomfortable. And actually, I happen to know anecdotally recently that it is undergoing a lawsuit because of all the water infiltration problems. So there's a big disconnect between the way we perceive what's fashionable, what's stylish, and what is high performance. Now, the crazy thing is, I hear a lot that EIFS looks cheap and stucco looks nice, therefore we want stucco. And so if you would you mind going right to the slide before for one more second? So to address that question, we built this mock-up in our office. On the right side is EIFS, on the left side is stucco over continuous insulation. You can see the peel back of the materials. You cannot tell the difference just by looking at it. And that's exactly the point, is that they both have all the same finish options. There is no way to tell which is which simply by looking at it. Sure, you can come up and knock on it, or you peel back the layers, you can see a difference, but aesthetically there is no difference. And then Marcy put together the next slide of a bunch of very handsome looking buildings.
Well, and I think that's so important, right? You're getting the look of all these other materials, but you're giving that building the benefit of having something that's energy efficient. And I love your analogy of putting clothes on it, right? Protecting that inner structure from moisture related damage.
And I think the other thing we've done, we've come up with all these little vignettes or anecdotes to show the durability, because that's, along with the not real, is the perception of not durable. And often it's precisely the opposite. It's more durable.
Well, Paul, you must have known what was the next slide.
Yeah, so this is my friend Therese Ferguson on the left there. She's an architect in town. And this was another question that comes up all the time, is EIFS has a perception of being so breakable that you'd stick your elbow in it and it cracks because it's made of foam, right? And so what we did, we built this mock-up that EIFS is about. So we gave her safety glasses and gloves and a hammer, and we invited a whole bunch of architects from the community and let them smack at this mock-up. This one that she's about to hit has high impact mesh. And then we have another mock-up that you can't see in this image, which has standard mesh. And what you'll see in the presentation is that if you work really hard at the one with high impact mesh, you may possibly be able to ding it a little bit. The standard mesh, you can put a hole in it, but that's true of a lot of cladding systems. If you take a hammer to metal cladding, you're gonna also damage that one pretty well. So if it's a job where you know, you simply can't afford any, it's gonna be exposed to that much damage, you may want to go with a masonry surface, something like that. But yeah, so we just wanted to clarify, like, how breakable is it? And what you'll find out is not too breakable.
I included another picture in there too. There's if you go onto the Drive It website, you can find their missile test. So they launch a 2x4 into the surface. So so there's a lot of great videos of that. We've got pictures of people breaking a bat, a video of one of our colleagues breaking a bat, hitting the wall. So you're right, there's different levels of durability, and I think that's just one of those other misconceptions. this last one.
Yeah, this one kind of goes back to what we were talking earlier about the perception of it being foam and tacky or something like that. And for those of you who aren't architects, may have trouble understanding what this means. EIFS is dishonest, but for those of you who are architects, I bet you've heard this before. And this is the idea that if a building is wrapped in EIFS, it's not being an honest articulation of the structure. And so, whereas like a exposed concrete structural building, that is somehow honest. So me, I am a licensed architect, but I do have a little bit of trouble relating to that. And I'll go through my argument of why I don't think there's any validity into like being honest or dishonest. I tend to see things in terms of performance. Anyways, this happens to be an image of Snarkitecture, who did an installation in New York City about EPS foam and building with it. And the idea here is just that it's such a sculptural form. That's something I heard from architects previously too, is the ones who've embraced EIFS is you can do tremendous things with it. If you start to think about it as like, it's a canvas, it's a sculpture, and you can vary the thicknesses and the shapes and the colors that it doesn't have to look like some cheap strip mall tacky thing. It really can open the design possibilities.
Yeah, we definitely see that. We had a guest on in March. His name was Gator. Do you remember Gator coming on?
Absolutely.
And it was an art, you know, it really is. He was a master tradesman at really producing some amazing things. Some of his buildings, you know, trying to match the architectural details, and he can do that. It is a canvas for him.
Yeah, and Gator really gave us many examples of where they couldn't get there with what we call traditional materials. Yeah. And the EIFS, he was able to then work collaboratively and do the mock-ups to give them the exact look they want, often matching what was really a historical detail already on the site or the campus.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been able to do that any other way. So it's definitely true. Well, Keith, I think you've definitely piqued a lot of interest here. This has been a lot of really great information as it relates to EIFS present, past, and future. So we're really excited that you will be joining us in June along with our other presenters. So Keith, you're up, I think it's the 3rd week in June. So this will be great. There'll be a Tuesday and a Thursday track. So you can catch Keith either Tuesday or Thursday in that week in June. So we'll be sending out that registration information, but we're really excited to be able to have you come on and give this presentation in its entirety. So you provided a great teaser today.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks so much, Keith.
Thanks, Keith.
Here.
So
Paul, I'm pretty excited. This was a great presentation about.
I like the teaser concept, right? Because it gives people, you know, this is a half hour to say, why should you come spend a little bit more time with Keith?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Coming up. So that's
perfect.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So we'll be sending you all more information on that series. But as always, if you have a story to tell or you want you want a design challenge to be talked about live on Tremco Live, there's my email address because we'd love to hear from you.
We need a polling question next time on CEIFS.
Okay, we'll do that. With Scott Robinson as our guest, celebrating EMA's 40th year, we'll do a CEIFS polling question, and be sure to give Trevor Brown from JE Dunn that shout out for sure. So thanks everybody. I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thanks everybody. Be safe.